Why does the figure of Jesus continue to divide opinions and inspire millions around the world? This video reveals surprising aspects about whether Jesus was merely a spiritual leader or truly the Son of God. The complexity of his identity and the impact of his messages have challenged historians, theologians, and believers for centuries. As we explore these profound questions, we will uncover together new perspectives that may challenge what we know about the central figure of Christianity. The expectation of Jews regarding a Messiah is based on ancient prophecies describing a leader destined to liberate Israel and establish an era of peace and justice. Traditionally, it was believed that this Messiah would be a direct descendant of King David, someone capable of restoring Israel to its former glory and bringing salvation to his people. However, Jesus did not meet these expectations because his leadership was not based on weapons or royalty, but on love, forgiveness, and humility. He did not defeat the Romans or establish an earthly kingdom, which led to disillusionment for many. Quietly walking the hills of Galilee, Jesus did not come to claim a throne of swords and crowns, but to sow the seeds of an invisible kingdom in the hearts of men. A kingdom that does not rise with swords and shields, but through acts of love and words of peace. Reflecting on the life of Jesus, we remember a carpenter who turned water into wine, multiplied loaves and fish to feed crowds. His stories, echoing through the centuries, show us that true power lies in multiplying, not subtracting, in uniting, not dividing. The parables Jesus told were like precious jewels cast to the listeners, each revealing profound truths about forgiveness and mercy. For example, the story of the prodigal son who squandered his inheritance and at rock bottom realized that his father's unconditional love was the true treasure. The Father's embrace of reunion symbolized divine forgiveness, which embraces without reservation, without recalling faults. Love, a recurring theme in Jesus' teachings, manifested not only in words, but in concrete actions. Jesus touched lepers, dialogued with the marginalized, reached out to the fallen. This love was like a refreshing rain after a long drought, capable of revitalizing and transforming barren lands into flourishing gardens. Although many expected a warrior Messiah, Jesus offered the olive branch of peace. He did not come to overthrow Roman rule with violence, but to break the chains of hatred and prejudice with the serene strength of his presence. And even in crucifixion, a crown of thorns replaced the golden crown some desired for him, symbolizing his spiritual kingship over earthly expectations. At the height of his suffering on the cross, Jesus uttered a prayer for those crucifying him. "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." This plea for forgiveness, whispered in the shadows of Golgotha, echoed like the nightingale's song in the dead of night, reminding us that true greatness can emerge even in the depths of adversity. The cross, though to many symbolizes only pain, for others is a beacon of hope, pointing to resurrection and promising new life to all who believe. The rejection of Jesus by the Jews is a long-standing topic dating back to the early days of Christianity. This disbelief can be grouped into three main categories: theological differences, messianic expectations, and cultural issues. At the core of theological differences, Judaism views God as singular and indivisible, a belief that resonates deeply in synagogues and in the hearts of its faithful. The God of sacred texts is a beacon of unity that does not admit division or multiplication. When Jesus presented himself not only as a messenger, but as the Son of God himself, this deeply shook the foundations of Jewish faith. For them, the idea of someone proclaiming themselves as the Son of God, walking the earth in human form, was as astonishing as seeing the sun rise in the west. Jesus spoke of an intimate relationship with God, calling him Father, a revolutionary and unsettling concept for those strictly following Moses' laws. "I and the Father are one," Jesus asserted. And this statement reverberated through the hills of Jerusalem, like thunder on a clear day. For many Jews, this represented a radical departure from traditional faith, centered on worshipping a formless God who could never be personified as a human figure. Furthermore, the implications of this new doctrine introduced a wave of change for which many were unprepared. The Messiah they expected should be an earthly liberator, a warrior king who would restore the state of Israel and free it from Roman rule. However, Jesus preached a different kingdom, not one of swords and shields, but a kingdom of spirits and truths, invisible to the eyes, but palpable to the heart. "My kingdom is not of this world," Jesus stated, sketching in the air a kingdom that subverted traditional expectations and challenged deep cultural roots. Such roots were as entrenched as the olive trees on the hills of Judah. The Jewish society of the time highly valued tradition and established order, elements in which Jesus, with his revolutionary ideas and diverse group of followers, emerged as both an innovator and a disturber of peace. He conversed with sinners, touched the impure, and challenged the teachings of priests and Pharisees, disrupting the delicate social balance. Jesus not only challenged theological concepts and messianic expectations, he completely shook the existing structure. His parables, filled with hidden meanings and universal truths, spoke of forgiveness and unconditional love, beautiful pillars, yet strange to the rigidity of Jewish law at that time. The people expected a leader who would reaffirm power and dominance, but Jesus proposed a path of humility and service. The discrepancy between the expected and the manifested was immense, as vast as the starry sky over the Negev desert. Therefore, rejection was not merely a matter of misunderstanding or obstinacy. It was a clash of foundations, a meeting of opposing tides that, despite their potential to create a new form of faith, ultimately reinforced ancient divisions. Like a beacon illuminating different paths in the darkness, Jesus proposed a new way of understanding God, but not everyone was ready to navigate the unfamiliar waters he revealed. Historically, Jews were strictly monotheistic, worshipping a single God in synagogues and temples around the world. The belief in a single God was essential to them. Jesus, however, presented himself as equal to God, which was interpreted as blasphemy, contradicting the traditional conception of God. The Bible does not explicitly state that Jesus claimed to be God, but it mentions that he proclaimed himself one with God, leading to ambiguous interpretations. Tensions heightened when, according to the Gospel of John, some Jews accused Jesus of blasphemy, declaring, "We are not stoning you for any good work," they said, "but for blasphemy because you, a mere man, claim to be God." Faced with these accusations, Jesus did not clearly defend himself, reinforcing the impression that he deeply believed in his words. Imagine, if even today his statements can be misunderstood, what about in those ancient times, where each expression carried the weight of centuries of traditions? The idea that a man, walking among them, could have the audacity to declare himself divine was like thunder in a clear sky. For many, this sounded more like a challenge than a message of hope. At the heart of this issue lay a profound gap in understanding. For the Jews, worshipping a single God was the foundation of everything, the pillar that not only sustained them, but also defined their identity as a people. When Jesus spoke of his union with God, he was not trying to erase or rewrite this central truth, but rather to deepen their understanding of who God is and how he could relate to his children. But how good intentions sometimes get lost in translation. The reaction to these words was a mix of indignation and curiosity. Some saw in Jesus a revolutionary, perhaps even a heretic. Others, however, felt that his words carried something more, a breath of something new, and in a way wonderfully liberating. After all, if God were truly so close, so intertwined with humanity, what would that mean for people's everyday lives? The possibility was both daunting and enticing. Jesus, with his unique ability to touch people's hearts through parables and acts of compassion, was painting a picture of a God not distant, ruling from an unreachable throne, but of a loving Father, desiring to walk alongside his children on life's dusty roads. This was an image that challenged the rigid and sometimes cold conception many held. He offered a relationship, not a religion of empty rituals. Like any significant change, Jesus' proposal was not warmly received by everyone. The guardians of tradition saw it as a threat to their power and authority. After all, a people who find God in their own hearts and experiences are a people who do not need intermediaries. Thus, Jesus' words, intended to bring peace and unity, also ignited sparks of conflict. The symbolism of Jesus as a reflection of the divine is indeed an aspect worthy of special attention. While many expected a leader to liberate them through power and strength, Jesus presented himself as the Lamb, anticipating his own sacrifice. This act, culminating in his crucifixion, revealed the true essence of divine power. Not a power that subjugates and destroys, but one that offers itself and restores. The idea of the Trinity, introduced by Christianity with the figures of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, directly contrasts with the Jewish belief in the unity of God, reaffirmed by the Shema Israel. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. This concept of a tripartite deity directly contradicts the Jewish notion of a single God, creating one of the foundations of theological divergences between the two traditions. Furthermore, Jesus' message of mercy and forgiveness contrasted with the more traditional Jewish view of a God who rewards the obedient and punishes the disobedient. This discrepancy was enough for many Jews to reject his teachings. Messianic expectations also played a crucial role in disbelief. The Jews of the time expected a Messiah to liberate them from Roman rule and restore the earthly kingdom of Israel, a political and victorious leader, not someone who would face a humiliating death at the hands of his enemies. In this context, Jesus brought a revolutionary proposal that subverted prevailing expectations. He spoke of a kingdom, yes, but not one built with stones and fortresses, rather one founded in the hearts and spirits of people. This differentiated vision was so foreign that many could not see beyond their dreams of liberation and power. For them, a Messiah who preached serving others and loving enemies was insufficient and frustrating, like a gentle rain trying to extinguish a forest fire. Yet Jesus insisted that his way represented true transformative power. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth, he said, completely overturning the notion of strength and conquest for those accustomed to thinking in terms of armies and victories. Such words sounded like a melody played in reverse, difficult to understand and easy to reject. Furthermore, the fate of Jesus, his death on the cross, was the final blow for many. How could the expected liberator, the promised Messiah, end his journey in such a humiliating and painful manner? This question still resonates, challenging conventional perceptions of power and redemption. In the perception of many at that time, the cross did not symbolize salvation, but represented an utter defeat. A Messiah who dies crucified contradicted every expectation of victory they hoped to witness. However, this breaking point, this seemingly tragic outcome, was actually the core of the message that Jesus came to bring. The cross was not an end, but a new beginning. Through his resurrection, he demonstrated that the true kingdom he proposed was indestructible, not subdued by pain, suffering, or even death. It was a silent but profound revolution that began in the soul and spread like the sunrise after a long, dark night. Maimonides, an influential Jewish thinker, argued that God has no physical form, is eternal and infinite. Asserting that God could become human diminishes his divinity, something incompatible with Jewish scriptures that proclaim God is not mortal, Along this line of thought, the idea of an incarnate God, as presented in Christianity, was a real stumbling block for many Jews of that time. For them, how could the infinite divine, who fills heaven and earth, condense into a single human figure, subject to pain and death? This concept not only challenged, but seemed to distort the millennia-old roots of their faith. Jesus' coming, with his miracles and teachings about the nature of God, sought to build a bridge over this theological chasm. "Anyone who has seen me has seen the Father," he said, trying to explain that his presence among humans was a reflection of the divine, not a reduction. However, this bridge often seemed more like a mirage, difficult to cross for those firmly anchored in tradition. This resistance was not just a matter of stubbornness or lack of vision. It was as if, over centuries, the Jewish people had built a sturdy wall, stone by stone, of convictions and laws that clearly defined who God was. Jesus' arrival, with his revolutionary ideas, seemed more like a schism than a message of salvation, shaking the structures that until then seemed unshakable. Thus, the figure of Jesus, instead of being seen as a blessing, was often perceived as a storm, stirring the calm waters of Jewish faith. For many, accepting that God could cry, sweat, and bleed was like trying to fit the ocean into a jar, a challenge both logical and spiritual that many were not willing to face. However, in the heart of this hurricane of doubts and debates, Jesus' teachings about love, forgiveness, and humility continued to germinate in open hearts, suggesting that perhaps the true greatness of God did not reside in distance and impassibility, but in proximity and vulnerability. He demonstrated, through his life and ultimately through his death and resurrection, that the true essence of God was unconditional love, a love that hesitates not to descend to the depths of the human condition to touch and transform suffering souls. The dialogue between what was taught by Maimonides and what was lived by Jesus continues to be a fertile field for reflection. While one emphasizes the absolute transcendence of God, the other reveals an immanent God who walks alongside his own, a shepherd who knows each sheep by name. Cultural differences also influenced the rejection of Jesus. Jewish society was highly stratified, with priests and religious leaders occupying high positions. Jesus, in turn, preached a message accessible to all, challenging the social structure of the time and threatening the position of established leaders. Just imagine, here he came, without pomp or privilege, speaking of a kingdom where the last would be first and the first last. A true revolution not only spiritually but also socially, which questioned the prevailing order. Jesus did not confine his preaching to the synagogues, but extended his words through the streets, fields, by the lakeside, reaching fishermen, tax collectors, and even the marginalized, who were rarely seen near the upper echelons of religious leadership. His approach was like a cool breeze on a stifling day, offering relief and hope to those who had felt ignored for so long. Religious leaders, accustomed to almost unquestionable respect, saw in this new teacher a direct threat. How could someone, without any noble title or known priestly lineage, challenge centuries of tradition? Jesus' teaching, which valued love and compassion above ceremonies and titles, functioned like a mirror, reflecting a distinct image from what the religious leaders wished to see. Jesus' parables, filled with wisdom and insights, often exposed the hypocrisies and injustices practiced by those who called themselves guardians of the faith. His stories were simple, but the messages, deeply moving, resonated directly with the core of the law: to love God above all and to love one's neighbor as oneself. This disarming simplicity was itself revolutionary. The reaction to this message was varied. While some saw in Jesus the promise of a new beginning, others felt as if the ground was trembling beneath their feet. For these latter ones, the possibility of losing their status and power resembled an impending storm on the horizon. The climax of this tension occurred with events like the cleansing of the temple, where Jesus openly criticized the merchants, denouncing what he saw as exploitation of faith. This action symbolized his disgust with religious corruption and marked his stance against abuse of power. It was as if he was trying to cleanse not only the sacred ground, but also the very heart of religion from impurities. Therefore, the difference between Jesus and the leaders of his time lay not only in their ideas, but in their practice. He did not just preach a new understanding of God, he demonstrated through his actions how to live according to that understanding. He personified his message, walking among the people, healing, teaching, and above all, serving. Thus, while some clung to traditions and power, others found in Jesus a path to true transformation. It was a choice between maintaining the structures of the past or embracing the promise of a future where every person, regardless of their social position, could find their place in the kingdom of God. The inclusiveness preached by Jesus, which encompassed the marginalized, such as the sick and the poor, was seen as subversive. His way of teaching and the miracles he performed were perceived as threats to the authority of leaders, destabilizing the established order. It was as if with every step Jesus took toward the forgotten, a brick was removed from the wall of segregation and prejudice. He demonstrated in practice that no one was beyond the reach of divine love and compassion. For the powerful, this reality was hard to grasp. To them, the social order that kept the less fortunate on the margins was not just natural, but necessary. However, Jesus, with his radical inclusiveness, painted a new picture where everyone had a seat at the table, regardless of their physical, social, or economic condition. This was not just revolutionary, it was a direct challenge to established norms. Imagine the scene: Jesus surrounded by lepers, beggars, and women seen as impure, all attentively listening to his words of hope and redemption. This image was powerful and provocative, as if he were weaving a new social tapestry, where threads once discarded were now essential to the final design. Jesus' miracles especially served as signs that something grand was happening. They were not just demonstrations of divine power, but manifestations of a new order where suffering was not ignored. Each healing, each miracle, was a sign that the last could indeed be first in the kingdom of God. Of course, this deeply bothered those at the top of the religious hierarchy. Each miracle of Jesus was like a blow to their authority, each parable a critique of their interpretation of the law. The way Jesus dealt with the marginalized not only questioned the legitimacy of these leaders' power, but undermined the very foundation upon which that power was built. Thus, it's no surprise that the tension between Jesus and the religious leaders grew. With every person he touched, with every outcast brought to the center of the community, the old structures trembled. It was as if the old walls of exclusion began to crack under the weight of a love that knew no barriers. It is important to note that rejection of Jesus did not mean that the Jews were less religious. They continued to follow their traditions and practices, maintaining their faith even after Jesus' death. The issue was not lack of faith, but theological, cultural, and expectational differences that created a barrier between Jesus' teaching and acceptance by many of his contemporaries. The rejection of Jesus by the Jews should not be interpreted as a rejection of his values of love and compassion, as his moral and ethical teachings influenced many, even among those who did not recognize him as the Messiah. Furthermore, it is vital to affirm that such rejection should never be used as a pretext for anti-Semitism or to justify the historical persecution faced by the Jews. In the New Testament, we find texts that allude to the divinity of Jesus, such as in the second epistle of Peter, which describes Jesus as our God and Savior. This expression suggests an integration of Jesus' divine and human identities, proposing a new way of understanding the relationship between God and humanity. The story of Thomas, who doubted until he could touch the wounds of the resurrected Jesus, exemplifies the complexity of human faith. This story, laden with emotion and detail, illustrates the process by which faith can evolve from doubt to deep conviction. The scriptures of the New Testament are more than mere accounts. They open perspectives for a broader understanding of divine purpose. Each miracle and parable of Jesus not only demonstrates his power, but also resonates through time, inviting everyone to reflect on the true definitions of salvation and redemption. Revisiting the figure of Jesus through these accounts, he reveals himself not only as a leader or social reformer, but as a teacher whose life continues to influence, inspire, and transform people beyond religious and historical barriers. The universality of his teachings suggests a meeting point for diverse cultures and beliefs, emphasizing love for others, unconditional forgiveness, and the tireless pursuit of justice. The story of Thomas, often called Saint Thomas, deeply illustrates the universal essence of human, transcendent, and divisive values. After the resurrection, he refuses to believe until he can see and touch the marks of crucifixion on Jesus. When he finally does, his exclamation, "My Lord and my God," not only reflects a moment of overcome skepticism, but highlights the complexity of Christian faith, which accepts Jesus not only as a spiritual leader, but as the incarnation of God himself. This question of Jesus' divinity remains a point of disagreement between Jews and Christians, with profound implications for both religious traditions. While Christians see in Thomas's declaration a recognition of Jesus' true divine and human identity, for many Jews, the notion of God becoming human is inconceivable, remaining faithful to the belief in a single and eternal God, transcendent and unlinked from any human form. This divergence is not just theological, but strikes at the heart of how each tradition understands the relationship between the Creator and creation. This contrast encourages us to reflect on the role of doubts and questioning in the journey of faith. Like Thomas, many of us need to see to believe, seeking tangible signs that reinforce our belief. This quest, far from being a sign of weakness, is an essential part of spiritual growth, allowing faith to deepen and solidify through personal experience and reflection. The story of Thomas resonates with a universal call to questioning and the pursuit of a faith that is not based solely on past traditions but is lived and affirmed in the heart of each individual. It is a reminder that faith, at its essence, is an ongoing dialogue, not only with scriptures and teachings, but also with the depths of our own soul. Furthermore, this episode highlights Jesus' mercy and patience towards those who doubt, showing that even in disbelief, there is room for revelation and understanding. Thus, Jesus' interaction with Thomas offers us a powerful perspective on the nature of faith, one that acknowledges the complexity of human doubts and proposes a path of understanding and acceptance. The way Jesus dealt with Thomas after his resurrection highlights an approach of profound empathy and understanding. He did not rebuke Thomas for his disbelief, but gently invited him to see and touch his wounds, demonstrating that true faith often arises from vulnerability and the recognition of our own uncertainties. This gesture by Jesus can serve as a valuable model for how we handle differences in belief within our communities and even among different religious traditions. Instead of demanding conformity or condemning doubt, we can offer space for questioning and discovery, fostering an environment where faith can grow authentically and personally. Therefore, Thomas's story is not just an account of personal conversion, but an open invitation to all of us to embrace our doubts as an integral part of the path of faith. In this sense, it teaches us that true faith is not the absence of doubt, but the courage to face it, seeking from God the answers that the human heart longs for. While Christians and Jews may continue to have distinct views on the nature of Jesus, both can find in Thomas's example a call to reflection and dialogue. After all, it is in the exchange of ideas and experiences that we can find common ground, learning from each other and perhaps bringing our understandings of the divine closer together. However each tradition interprets the divinity of Jesus, what matters is keeping the doors of dialogue open, allowing each question and doubt to be starting points for deeper faith and broader understanding. To conclude that Jesus is the Messiah and the Son of God for many Jews would be to radically reinterpret their traditional monotheistic beliefs, representing a significant alteration in the Jewish understanding of God as a singular entity. The dialogue between Jews and Christians on these issues remains crucial. It helps promote mutual understanding and respect, despite profound theological differences. If you felt inspired, curious, or even challenged by our discussion, don't keep these reflections to yourself. Join our community, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon to not miss any of our future videos, promising to delve even deeper into these intriguing topics. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video and share it with friends and family. Who knows, maybe the next video will answer a question that's on your mind. And of course, we would love to hear your opinion and personal experiences. Comment below how you see the figure of Jesus and how his stories touch your life. Your interaction is what enriches our exchange of knowledge and experiences. God bless.